Hi. It's time for another Boone check-in. I hope you've all been well. I have a few items of business regarding Sarah Boone and what I've been thinking about. And the first is I have a question, and it is I'm curious to know if anyone knows, or maybe everyone knows except me, what happened with that book that her brother bought her to help her win in court against Brian. Because I know that that was a very expensive book, several $100s, which I was surprised when someone said that he did in fact purchase it for her, and I wonder if he really did, because if I were him, I would say I did and then keep messing with her and be like, oh, it was sent back, whatever. Um, First of all, the cool yawns on her to ask anyone for something that expensive, let alone her brother, who has made it very clear that he has other expenses and health issues, but we know that Sarah does not care about that. So I was just curious if anyone knows what happened with that, if she ever got it. And my guess is that her brother is no longer speaking to her, but again, I don't know because I haven't been paying super close attention to the recent communications. But I have been paying a little bit of attention, and one thing in particular has stuck with me, and that is that when Sarah is, I believe it's Lana, she's kissing Lana's ass, of course. And she says that she doesn't have a lot of friends. And the reason for that is because George threatened them all. So otherwise, she would have a lot of friends, obviously. And it also reminded me a little bit of that time she's very drunk, of course, on the body cam, and she's got like some broads with her, and she's telling the cops, "I have friends." And but when Sarah's drunk like that, she says all kinds of stuff. She's trying to get hugs, and she's like, "He never thought I would do it, huh?" And it's like, bitch, you called the cops every day. What do you mean he never thought you would do it? I mean, yeah, he's probably a little surprised every time because he's usually taking a nap. But anyway, so the Friends thing kind of stuck with me. And what struck me about the Lana and Friends thing is that a few things. One, I wonder what makes Sarah think that she has to explain why she doesn't have friends. Is it because she just wanted to tell Lana, to kiss her ass a little bit and explain that she doesn't have a lot of friends, and then make it sound like, I mean, obviously it's not her fault that as part of her extensive abuse, her friends were ripped away from her by George's threatening of them. And then I started to think, well, maybe if she's self-conscious about not having friends, I wonder if it's because I mean, I would imagine that there are most of the other women in prison with her and that were in jail with her had, well, we know that they had pictures of their families because Sarah was trying to make her point with that and kept trying to get her pictures of her friends and family to kind of put on airs, I believe. And the hot meal was really, I think, in part to show off that she too had someone sending her. But I wonder if it's because she saw that, come Mother's Day or Christmas or whatever holidays, uh, that she was alone and most of the other women were not, and that she is the only one whose child doesn't come to see her and whose brothers don't come to see her, and she doesn't have any friends from the 42 years of her life until she was arrested, which is not really a good look for someone like Sarah who likes to appear a certain way. As we have all established and commented on quite a bit, um, Sarah does not read a room. She does not have good social cues. She never looks inward, and she really never even looks outward. She's just static in her own mess. And I thought, if she is self-conscious about, would she be self-conscious? She might be, about not having anyone come to see her. But I think that it would almost immediately turn into another example of how she has been victimized, because her former ex-husband is horrible and she has no family, which is actually not true. I mean, she has two brothers and probably some extended family, and, you know, and she has no friends, which of course also is not her fault. So, you know, it's an angle she can work in her victim stance. And like I said, she's not looking inward, so she's not like, where have I gone wrong that I'm completely alone now and all these other women are not? And then I also had a thought. I thought, I wonder if someone or someone's had made a remark to her, like, where's your kid? Where's your family? Where don't you have any friends? Because that is something that would make Sarah, it's kind of like when George told her that she's not a mother, and then she had to go barefoot to her former husband's home and torture them for a couple of hours, and then, you know, and then he was, that night he was taken to jail for like a month, and that was the only month that she's ever fulfilled her parental obligations. So we know that certain words can affect her in such a way that she, you know, she's vindictive. So she doesn't, you know, just like she wasn't didn't start fulfilling her parental obligations because she wanted to be a good parent. She did it because she was so angry at George for having the nerve to say that she's not a mother, when we all know that she is an excellent mother to her son, outstanding mother to her son. And so I thought, well, maybe some comments were made, and it would not really surprise me either. I certainly hope that there's some women in there giving her a hard time, because she deserves it. And so maybe that's why she was saying that. She's kind of getting her story together, and, you know, her victim song, or adding to it. And it just struck me because it was this text, or these texts, had a very intentional thread running through them. That was this manufactured fictional explanation of why she doesn't have anyone. Sarah is self-snitching in a roundabout way in this case, because she, as a lot of people like her, she projects. So almost everything that she says that various people, her attorneys and the judge and her former husband and George, of course, and that she claims that they do to her, she does to everyone. And while I definitely do not see George being the type who would threaten her friends, and we've seen proof of how understanding that he was, actually, when Sarah wanted to branch out. And I think it actually bothered Sarah that George was not jealous. That in itself made her jealous, I believe, because she's 13 years old here and 68 years old here. You know, George knew one of the complex superintendents, and he knew some of the neighbors back from Philly, and that family of neighbors that George was friendly with is the family in which Sarah accused one of the men, or the man in the townhome, of assaulting her. And she stood her ground on that, as the property manager told us, and then kind of kept to herself for a while, or until she was incarcerated. And that's because Sarah was lying, obviously, and she was lying because George was probably, I don't know, spending 2 seconds saying hello to them. I don't think they were very close, but they were too close for Sarah's liking, obviously. And Sarah isolated him to the point where, George, I'm sure, had friends. And if somehow George was incarcerated at the time when Sarah was instead of her, or also, he would have his family visiting him. It's true, his mother and his father are alive, so there is that. But he would have all of his siblings visiting him, I would imagine, when they could, and his children. And they would send pictures, and he would have friends because he had friends. And, well, I mean, until Sarah started threatening them and accusing them of things, which is my point, of course. So now he was in a situation where even in the complex in which he lived, there was not one friendly face because Sarah was. It's almost like she took a page out of Letitia Stock's book there, but the two of them have written their own books very thoroughly. And that's not a very uncommon thing for people, women in particular, of course, like this to do, is accuse men of assaulting them. And as Letitia did a few times probably, but certainly she accused one of Al's associates in the military of assaulting her, and then they moved from Alaska, where she hated it. So I think she would have probably done that anyway, because that's kind of a thing that incredibly immature, not very intelligent people do. I'll say people because I'm sure men do it in their own, and I'm sure there are men who have done this, or they're like always talking about this woman who's all over him or whatever. It's not considered assault as much. So that's what I've been thinking about, and I'd be curious to know what you've been thinking about, or if you have um, any answers on the book situation or any thoughts on the other situation, because I have to really go back and listen to more of these texts and those again. I am very much looking forward to family court. I was even consider going. I mean, Florida is going to be really nice in August. And I also wanted to tell you that a few days ago, Hearmeowt, which I will put the link for this below, was kind enough to invite me on to a live with him again, and we read a motion from the family court that he had gotten for a GAL, or a guardian ad litem. In family court, a guardian ad litem is a court-appointed advocate who makes decisions about, after assessing the situation, makes decisions about what is in the child's best interest as far as custody goes, and visitation and relocating and things like that. Now, you might think that Brian is the one who's getting the guardian ad litem, but no. Sarah is the one who would like to get one. Now, those cost money, and we all know that Sarah is, or at least claims to be, destitute, and she must be, because she gets $1 and spends it 5 minutes before she got it. So, one of the reasons that a lot of us have said that it's difficult to move on from Sarah Boone is that, first of all, her behavior is so outrageous and enraging. And also, there is no satisfaction with her. Yes, she got the most stringent sentence possible. She's going to be locked up forever. But she remains the same. The more she is dealt a situation that a lot of human beings, most human beings, would take a look at themselves, or at least have some kind of sense of how to act, or just I mean, even Lori Vallow, who, even she, during her elocution, just stood up and talked about God, which was horrible, but not because God is horrible, but because she, used it as an excuse to. Anyway, we all know. If you don't know, save yourself. And but that was nothing compared to what Sarah Boone did. And Letitia Stout, who is horrible, didn't say anything. So that is that's very frustrating. There's no sense that justice has really been served in a way, because I mean, look, to me, George Torres's family seem like the kind of people who could take the high road. And normally, I like to consider myself somebody who takes the high road. If for no other reason than there's a lot less traffic. But this I cannot let go of. Although I do think it might be getting a little bit easier. And one of the reasons is because I find myself, as the days go on, feeling safer, actually safer, that she is locked up forever. Not safer for myself, of course, because the chances of me encountering her are not good, thank God. But safer for her son, for her former husband, for anyone who she could potentially be friends with. Although I think about Brian and his account of when things changed for her and how things changed for her, and I wonder how much they actually changed. I wonder if Sarah was pretty horrible before she had a son and decided to go buck wild. Those personality traits had to have been there. And the truth is that other than that one woman who went on that channel that I forget the name of it, ex Katrina, I think, who knew Sarah Boone when they were, grew up with her kind of. Other than her, we have not one person, other than Brian, of course, but who has an account of Sarah prior to February 24th, 2020. And that says something too, doesn't it? Not one friend comes forward and says, hey. I mean, yes, we've heard from her neighbors and they have nothing nice to say, but that was already when she was Drunky the Bear. It's just so bizarre to me. And I think that, my theory is that Sarah has been a manipulator, a very kind of bare bones, simplistic manipulator, and it's worked for her whole life. And when she started drinking and started, I think maybe she's obviously very selfish, completely self involved, and having a child for someone like that, although I've never seen anything like this before, would obviously have not a great effect. And I don't even think she has a love for her child, and we do see that with the Letitias and the Lauries, and they are a certain kind of way. But with Sarah Boone, I guess it's somewhat similar. They only care about the man at the moment that he's in her good graces, and then all hell breaks loose and things get really ugly. So I've been thinking about Sarah's life behind bars and her manipulation. And I've said it before, but I always think, I hope, no, every story goes the same way with Sarah. Well, except for George, who actually died. But she overwhelms, she uses and abuses. The more you give her, the more she needs. And eventually you are the enemy, because you can never please that person, and everything is an affront to her. So I obviously would like to avoid that happening to other people, but within the confines of a prison, there's only so far it can get, I would imagine. And I started thinking about what Sarah's life was like, and how being the victim, and we've said this before, but being the victim was her carte blanche. It was her it was her go-to crutch. It was her tool, and she enjoyed it. She during marriage counseling with Brian, she told the marriage counselor that Brian was abusing her, which he was not, and he was sitting right there, kind of like, "This is how I feel when you showed me." And that's when he knew, all right, this is really not going to work. But I don't think Sarah is going to get away with that in prison for several reasons. One is it's prison. Two is they already know she's a liar, and they had her pretty well pegged on that in that Richardson hearing when they read that psychological hot take on her, basically, for when she had her intake. So these guards see all the Sarah Boones of the world, or of Florida at least. So she cannot pull her nonsense there, because what she has done in the past is ramp it up, ramp it up. I mean, by the time we got to her allocution, we saw in real time what she did with George. She lied to the police many times, actively pursued it. She lied about him, of course, in her interrogation. She ramped it up and ramped it up and ramped it up. And because to her, the truth didn't matter, and it was, the property manager said herself that he didn't deny it. She said something to him and he didn't deny it. And we saw her in those body cams. They asked him, "What's up?" And he would not speak. So George was the perfect victim. And my guess would be that George was honest with her when they met, because that's how normal people do it, and probably told her that he was a bit of a ladies' man. And, that seed was planted since she was a jealous maniac. She would have been anyway, probably, but that really, I think, set the stage. And so what we did is we saw her lie upon lie upon lie, and when her lies were not believed, she doubled down. And this all crescendoed in her allocution when we heard stories we've never heard before. And, she describes her first date with George involving every kind of horrible, violent assault possible. And she also describes it as being in her townhome, which is interesting because, first of all, we know that she and George met when she was still married, and that they moved into the townhome together is certainly how she told it, and how I believe it may have been. She certainly wasn't in that townhome when they had their first date, whatever that was. So accountability, as we know, doesn't matter. And the truth is that she piles so many lies on top of lies on top of lies that it really doesn't matter, because there's too much to keep up with. It is overwhelming, as George said. And the prosecution knew that they didn't have to go over with a fine-tooth comb all the lies, because it was very clear. So she describes this first date, which anyone who knows any of the story knows is complete poppycock from the get-go, from the townhome to all the other nonsense that went on, that she claimed went on there. And for somebody who thinks that people are always lying to her, it does not occur to her that she has come this far, this extreme, that maybe people are not going to believe her. And maybe that's why they have not believed her. And that's why she is going to prison for life, because her story doesn't make sense. And it's not true. And everyone knows it. But somehow she manages to. It's just such a fascinating psyche. And it's so dangerous. So now in prison, it's as if Sarah has been declawed, so to speak. And she's going to have to rework her entire strategy. It seems to me that she has started that a bit, as she posits herself as a religious muse, a religious almost leader. I mean, not leader. And I'm not one of those people who thinks that Sarah's going to start a cult, because Sarah's too lazy to start a cult. That does take some work. But she did have, I mean, one or two of these. We've seen her texts, and we did hear one or two of these women who spoke for her say that she's very spiritual, or whatever the hell they said. But Sarah's going to have a problem with that too, because the truth is that people have read the Bible. People in prison, people not in prison, and religious people who are the people that she will be trying this out on. Some of them have actually read the Bible, Sarah, and it is my belief that Sarah has not. So, one of these religious bitches is going to call her out in her shit, and there's going to be a throwdown. That's all. I'm also looking forward to Sarah's family court hearing, not just because I want to see her get her ass handed to her, but because that will be the end as far as courtroom shenanigans. And I hope that, I'm trying to think, I think that when you're incarcerated, they basically just walk you out, chained back to the paddy wagon, and that's it. She will get her final perp walk, which she was possibly the only thing I've known her to be embarrassed about. So that delights me. Like I said, I want her to go to family court. I want her to have everything taken away from her, which I think she probably will. Almost everything, if not everything. And then her former husband and her sweet son can have peace, and she can sit there and stew and try to figure out how she's going to try and control people behind bars. Thank you for watching. I will see you very soon. Bye.